Hello, Fearless Gamers. Matt here for Fearless Games, and I'm here to welcome you to another episode of The Joy of Painting Minis. Well, we finished our last model, so we are now moving on to a new model, and this time we're going to be doing a Winged Vampire Lord from Warhammer Fantasy. I've had this guy for a while, been meaning to have an excuse to paint him, and I figured why not for this. And so, just to go over a few things first, it was base coated. As you can see, it was primed with Vallejo Model Air white, mainly because it's really cold outside, so we can't go outside and do some spray painting, and this is a very good, useful substitute for that. So we base coated them, we've washed them, and so now we're going to move on and start painting them. And we're first going to start with painting his skin, and we'll be using the following colors you now see on your screen. And so let's jump right in. Going to be using my standard brush for this, and we're going to be using a flesh tone color as a base to get this whole thing started. First, going to give this a good shake, and then let us proceed. Again, watering the palette down a bit just to help with thinning out the lines so it doesn't look like, so you don't actually see the brush strokes as you would if I didn't water it down. And we're just going to paint in all the areas that we're going to have this color. And so now, gets a little ramble, why do I have a vampire count model? Well, I was actually thinking of picking up vampire count during 5th ed. I liked the look of the models, and I liked their playstyle. I liked the whole. I was gonna play a summoning army and just have a bunch of vampires summoning up skeletons while having a couple of support dudes. I did start to collect it, but then for some reason I kind of stopped. I don't remember why. I think it was because I didn't like the point system in this game. I don't know if it's changed since last time I checked, but when I was looking into it, it was all percentage based. You know, oh, your army can you can have 25% of your army be HQs, or be leaders and cores and all that stuff. And me and percentages don't get along very well, so that deterred me from picking up this game. But I still kept the models, and I might get back into it. I don't know, I haven't decided yet what I want to do. If I want to get into fantasy again or not. But I did like this model. I thought it looks really cool. I like the whole wing sprout thing, you know, how he looks like he's transforming, which caught my attention. Now the paint scheme that I'm using to paint here is very similar to the one used to paint I think it's pronounced wraiths. The dudes, the little henchmen of the homunculuses for Dark Eldar. I'll be using that paint scheme because it's got a similar color scheme that the folks over at GW recommend for them, because I like that whole dead skin, they have this pale flesh look to them, and so I think that fits very well with vampires. So I figured I'd give this a shot in painting up this guy right here and see what the results end up being. And as you can see, I am using a new brush. My girlfriend for Christmas got me a new set of brushes, which was super awesome of her. And hopefully I'll be able to, I'll take care of these brushes as best as I can and get these guys to last me another good 2 or 3 years before I have to replace them again. But she gave me the whole set. That way, I don't have to worry about thinking about which paint brushes to use. I can just use the the paintbrush, the fact that the paintbrushes are labeled, and just use those as my base. And as you can see, I am bleeding out a little bit into the wing. That is okay, because we will be going over that with the wings with the membranes color later. And that should cover up any of those mistakes. But this will ensure nice coating of all the bits that are supposed to be this flesh tone color. And then we just have to paint a little bit of his chest here. Okay, and just keep moving along. Here, get this little piece of his chest all done up. Thankfully, not a whole lot of them is exposed skin, so we don't have to do too much. Yeah, there's one tricky part about this model is there's one part where it's just really tough to tell what's supposed to be skin and what's supposed to be the wing's membrane and what's supposed to be like a talon. Because, like, they do a detail piece up here, then they kind of, like, stop with that in the mold when it starts getting thinner and thinner in terms of the little points. So I used a little bit of it's great for like when you're working on this and you have no idea what area is supposed to be like what. Take a look at the GW website or whatever website to whichever model the company the website of the company that makes the model that you're painting, and see how their artist painted up. That'll give you nice point of reference to determine what it's supposed to look like. And as you can see, I chipped a little bit of my base, not too big of a deal. Now we're going to go on and paint his face, because checking out the reference images will give you a very good idea of how the artist interprets it, and will give you, basically, it'll pretty much tell you exactly how the model's supposed to look in terms of what's skin, what's clothing, and it'll help you in making decisions on how you're going to paint your minis, which is always nice. Paint up his face here. Okay, so that is all of the skin pieces on this model. And there's a little bit of touch up there. Catch any touch-ups that you need to do. Okay, clean off the brush. and give this a moment to dry. Alrighty, now that it's had some time to dry, we're going to put a shade over everything that we painted. And for this, we're going to do as very light shading on this guy. So we're going to take our shading brush that we have and water it a little bit just to give it a little, make it a little less intense. And then we're going to go over everything that we painted, flesh, the first base coat here. We paint all the flesh areas in this wash. And so what this wash is going to do is like before, is it's going to give us some defined shadows and add a little bit of coloring to this paint that we used, just to help it define the model a little bit more. And so you don't want to do too much, because then the shade pretty much becomes the color of the skin. You just want it just enough to catch the detail of all the nooks and crannies of the model. And like I said before, not being really careful about the wing membranes or anything, because this is a wash, so it's a very thin layer, so we can easily go over this without risk of ruining any of the detail on this model. Okay, then I'm going to paint up the face here, the same shade as the body. Okay. Just get a little bit, that should be a little bit darker. And the trick with any of these shades, especially the GW shades, is getting it so it's even. Because if it's not even, then it just causes a whole bunch of problems in terms of look and such, because then you have these big splotches and it just doesn't come out right in the end. And so now with this, we're going to let this take a moment to dry, and while we wait, I'm going to continue painting the parts of the head, the rest of the base colors that I'm going to be using. That way, I can just go right into it once we are done. So let me first get the next color here, which is going to be, where is it? My base color for the bones on the back of his head. Ah, there it is. And so this is going to go, because he's got this little like spine thing going on the back of his head here. Going to take our standard brush and add a little color, the base coat to that. Oops. So, we got this going. Just gonna try and worm this right into there. And down into here. Okay. So I'm gonna let that dry real quick. And while I wait for those to go, I'm going to paint his cape. Which, going to give it a... Very interesting. What color will I paint his cape? I think I will do a dark bluish color. So, let's see if I have an unopened bottle of this. Sorry about that. Apparently I paused the camera real quick to get a paint color, and apparently I hit the wrong button to pause it back. So, just to catch you up on what I'm doing, is we're painting the cape a dark blue right now. That way we get a nice little contrast to what next colors I'm going to put on it, and I feel like, you know, I very rarely paint blue, the bluish color unless I'm painting a librarian. So I thought it'd be nice to do something different. And to continue on with the rambling I was doing off camera, as you notice, we are using, as I mentioned before, this was base coated white. And reason behind this being base coat, this primed white and not black, is because of color appearance. When you base something black, the color, then the paint palette, then your color palette that you apply to the model tends to be very dark and basically toned down, because it's got this dark base coat, it's got this black shade underneath it. Whereas with a white base coat, white tends to make your colors pop a little bit more. So I want this guy to be bright. I don't want him to be this dark, brooding, well, he's going to look very dark and menacing later on, but I want his colors to pop. I want him to have this, like, fantasy-like look to his coloring. That way, he stands out from my 40K models. You know, I want him to have a little bit more of a bright look to his colors, vivid. That way you can actually see the blues are blues, and the whites are whites, and the browns are browns, and not just like very dark tones of those colors. That's why we're going with this instead of a black base coat. And so we're going to go through here, paint it up, And get into that little crevice there. Paint up those little bits there. And in case you guys are wondering, this isn't the start of a fantasy army. Primarily because I am waiting to see how things play out in end times. So, I don't know if vampire count will still be around, how's it going to change, what's going, and all that other jazz. So, I don't want to start investing in a fantasy, like, I don't want to invest in vampire count, and then 9th edition comes out and goes, oh, just so you know, vampire count's no longer playable in this version, because that would really stink. So, I'm painting this model primarily for fun, and see how things go. And once End Times is over, and whatever's supposed to happen happens, make a decision on where I'm going to go from there in terms of which army I'll play. So now we are going to move on to a detailed brush, still painting this cape, to get into those little tiny nooks and crannies a little bit better without messing up the rest of the model. Since we have most of them painted, parts of them painted now, we don't want to start accidentally coloring parts that aren't supposed to be colored. And so we go in here to get these nice corrects. And if you notice, like, sometimes I have this issue, if you start having issues where you're painting a miniature and the paint starts peeling and chipping because of all the handling that you're doing, I then strongly recommend wearing a pair of gloves, like thin latex or non-latex if you have an allergy to latex gloves. That way, you have a better handling surface, and you won't have as many issues with the paint chipping off because your hands are getting stuck to the paint or anything like that. So we get into these tiny little spots here. Thankfully, this will be all that we have to be done to those spots, so I won't have to deal with them. Get this, because he actually does have a tiny, tiny collar going around the front. Here. Okay. Okay, just gonna do one quick more coat over the areas that are a little thin in the paint coverage. That's another good thing about That's one little issue with having a white base coat. Sometimes the model requires extra coats of paint because you can see the strokes a little bit easier in white, I find, than you do black. Okay. Alrighty. So, just one last final touch here, and we will be out of time. So, this is going to be where we stop. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, Fearless Gamers, take care.